Great to see everyone here. If I did a proper introduction for this panel, that would take up our whole time. So I'm going to make a real quick attempt at a quick introduction for each of them. I truly think they don't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway, just for the few folks who might not know them. Abby Covert is these are all legends in the IA field, but Abby's flavor of legend, this goes back to, she began like a lot of people back in the day as a graphic designer, then quickly moved into like the IA world. She's the author of How to Make Sense of Any Mess, Stuck, Diagrams Help. And I think it's just now out. Is it out now, Abby, The Timeless Sense Making for Modern Sense Makers? Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's currently an independent IA educator, community builder. She's worked at Nike, Etsy, all kinds of cool places. She was a founding faculty member at the School of Visual Arts in New York, their product design graduate program, and she invented World IA Day. So Abby's here with us. Jessica comes to us from the library science world. Specifically, she was an art college librarian. So we have a lot of humanities cred on the panel as well. She's the author of the forthcoming book, The Ontology Pipeline, and she's a prolific Substack author. I can't keep up. I've got about 10 tabs open now trying to keep up with Jessica's writing. She's currently independent, but most recently she was the IA Information Architecture lead at Adobe. And she also teaches on the new Knowledge Graph Academy, which is how many cohorts have you done now, Jessica? Like three or four or four? Cool, yeah. And I was in the very first cohort, a really good program. Jorge Arango is a real architect. That's how he comes to us. He was migrated over from the physical architecture world to the information architect world. He's the author of at least three books that I know of. He's co-author on the current edition of the Polar Bear book, The Information Architecture for the Web and Beyond. His book, Living Information, I really appreciate it, and duly noted. It's a book he did about note taking. And Jorge and I recently connected, most recently at the Personal Knowledge Management Summit in Utrecht last spring, where he did a really nice talk. He's an independent, has been for many years with Boot Studio, and just consulted with, just a laundry list of prominent countries around the world. He was also at one point the managing editor at Boxes and Arrows, the prominent design publication, and was an adjunct professor at Cal Arts. So, and that's just part of each of their backgrounds. So, but let's just get right into the conversation. I want to ask each of what we're here to talk about is sort of the state of and future of and what we can all do to improve our careers in information architecture. And one of the ways I thought I'd like to start the conversation is with how do we cultivate a productive mindset as we go into whatever this new AI and knowledge and the new era that we're entering? Everybody's clearly experiencing like not normal times. So I'll just go. Anybody want to go first on that, or I can just go alphabetically, or um, Abby. I'm sorry, I saw you
That
laughing
was
at me,
an
so I'll make you go
interesting
first.
way. That was an interesting way to make me go first in either case.
Sorry, I didn't
No,
manipulate. I'm
no, no
sorry. Yeah.
worries. I think it's an interesting time to be alive for sure, and it's surely an interesting time to talk about information architecture. But I think that honestly, the mindset that I would like more people to keep through this period of change is that we actually already have all of the skills that we need to deal with this part. So I truly believe that the last 20 and 30 years of working through what is information architecture in terms of in context to capitalist business, what is it in terms of to academic institutions, what is it to nonprofit institutions, like we've figured out a lot of the patterns. The things that have shifted underneath us, I think, are going to continue to shift underneath us. I think that they're at the same level of like fashion in terms of the way things change. So we're going to have to deal with that. And this is just the first time that we're doing that as an entire industry. The last time that we all did this was in the dot-com era. And when that burst, we all had to figure out what does that mean. But we weren't yet all united the way that I feel like we are now. So I think it's a really interesting time to think about discernment and knowing that like you can't do everything, but you can be really strategic about what you do invest your time in. And so asking people to forget the happy path of what we thought the like process was going to be if we ever thought that we were going to get one. And instead like look at it like a tool set that you already have access to. You just have to kind of let go of the fear and have the trust that it actually does apply to the medium that's in front of us. We just haven't, quite pushed through just yet. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. Jorge or Jessica? Um,
I- I'll add to what Abby said. I agree that we do have the tool set. I would say that we have the foundations. I do think that it's very important to, if you're going to be practicing, to understand the technologies that you're working with hands on. Um, so that's one thing that where I would caution. It's like, yes, we do have the foundational, we have the conceptual tooling, but the technology that we're working with now is different, and it's important to understand how it works. And I would put forth that the best way to do that is to work with it hands on as opposed to read about it.
And I
nice.
maybe have like a little bit of a saltier perspective. Um, but it predates the .com. Information organization, it goes back millennia. And so, technologies, the idea of evolving strategy alongside technologies goes back to classification systems, to paper. Paper is a technology, to books, to the printing press. And so this constant evolution, I actually think it's an exciting invitation to continue to evolve alongside. And that includes skills. I mean, we all have the potential to grow and to evolve and to change. And some of the things that, when we hang on and grasp to old ways of doing things, in spite of new technologies presenting themselves, everything stagnates. And that's a pretty boring life. So change is hard, is difficult. But one of the things that from an information architecture perspective, I think it's fascinating to dissect exactly, for example, what large language models are doing, how they're constructed, how they're architected from an information perspective. So it's more holistic in terms of approach.
Nice. Jessica and Abby, you both mentioned like historical precedent for this.
Mhm.
Abby, you mentioned the dot-com boom, and Jessica, you mentioned that this is just an ongoing information alignment with technology project. What can we learn, or what lessons have you each thought about from each of those eras you mentioned?
I feel like the one that I keep comparing AI to, which I don't know if anyone else has landed on this comparison, is asynchronous JavaScript calls. Like that was the last time that I really felt like my world was truly rocked as an IA. And like I don't know what date would we put on that the like Ajax moment? Somebody throw it in the chat because I'm not good at that dating things
2000
historically.
something.
I want to say it was like 2005, maybe
Yeah, I was going
four.
to say three, but somewhere, but anyhow, about
Mike
20 years
Atherson
ago.
says 2006, and he's
Okay.
got the gray beard of confidence, so I'm going with it. But when that happened, it was like we had finally gotten to this place where, from a industry standpoint, we had our arms wrapped around stuff. You know, we were selling into organizations. We had processes that were documented. We were hiring for roles that actually had job descriptions for approximately 6 months. And then we had asynchronous JavaScript calls. And as soon as the page started to change without it being refreshed, everything changed in terms of how we plan for content, how we think about data, how we think about data models, all of it instantaneously changed. And that wave just like went through. And I watched for gosh, at least 10 years as people got used to that idea because businesses weren't used to it. Businesses hadn't come along. So we're always not only dealing with the push, like Jessica's saying, but we're almost always at the front of it too. Like we're seeing the brunt of it, because I think that's our job. Like it's our job to be slightly out front of the information dilemma so that it doesn't crush everyone. Yeah.
I
Love
absolutely
that.
agree. And it's like, to add to that, I have this little obsession with there's a book published that's available on Internet Archive called Automation in the Library of Congress that was dated in 1964. And it's worth a look. And what's interesting about it was, with digitization of bibliographic records in libraries, that was a game changer. And they were able to network throughout North America, a few libraries in Canada and North America, network a little over 100 libraries, and have them talking to each other. So, and that was like a huge, like if you think of these huge movements, some of them aren't exactly so obvious. There's also the evolving roles that have changed alongside. So at that point, librarians were known as, or libraries as a discipline, it was known as information science. At that turning point, it became library science. There was like a huge shift, and so you have human machine interactions. You have this sort of emergence of like how humans interact and interoperate with machines, and that is sort of the full-fleshed evolution into the digital space, of how information presents itself.
Nice. Hey, Jorge, you didn't mention specifically that, but I wonder if your comments about the need to get hands-on experience, if there are prior experiences in your career that led to that insight.
Yeah, there are. And Jessica said earlier that she was going to have a salty take, and that kind of gives me permission to get salty here. I was thinking back to the time that Abby was talking about when I think it was Jesse James Garrett who coined the term Ajax, right? Like, so at that time, the the technology was a very active topic in this community. I remember at that time there was this ongoing discussion about the distinction between big information architecture and little information architecture, where I'm going to overgeneralize here, but the main gist was information architecture as some kind of discipline in service to making better websites and making better catalogs or what have you, like these kind of like a sub-discipline of user experience design in some ways. And that's what I think of as like little information architecture. And then there's big information architecture, which is an order of abstraction removed from that, thinking about how we organize information systems to make information more useful, right? And that can take on many, many manifestations. And I think that if we are to learn anything from the past, given our current situation, I think it was a mistake to lean into little information architecture. Clearly, information architecture became too closely associated with a particular set of technologies that are still very much valid. But right now, we are being called to ask a different set of questions. And the questions are not about how we implement things, but what things should we implement? And those are higher order questions. They're more strategic questions. And they are questions that I think information architects are uniquely situated to be able to answer. There are other disciplines that can help with the implementation side of things. So when I talk about getting hands-on with the technology, I just want to be very clear. I'm talking about understanding the technology as a material. I'm not talking about understanding the technology because I expect that you're going to be a practitioner. Now I'll answer your question directly, Larry. When I was a student in architecture school, we had this class called Materials of Construction, and we had to learn the theory behind materials. So, the plasticity of certain materials, the dynamics of steel or wood or what have you. But then we also had a workshop where we had to like put on welder's masks and use an arc welder and build a brick wall, right? We were not asked to do that because we were expected to graduate and become builders. We were asked to do that because when we draw a line on a plan, we need to understand what that line represents. And that's when I'm talking about technology, that's what I'm talking about. I do want a return to big information architecture. The people who help answer the question, what are we making, not how are we making it?
I love that distinction. Thanks, Jorge. And it also reminds me that like the abstraction that you talk about that necessitates that. I mean, I think that's where we're at. Both LLMs and some of the semantic technologies that some of folks on the panel are involved with require, I think, a different kind of abstract thinking about modeling, like using an LLM as a design material or integrating things. Abby or Jessica, do either of you have like thoughts on that about working with these new tools? Or
Yeah, I do. And honestly, the comment I have to make is actually about people. So I worry about us transferring the way that we've been working with people into how we're working with AI. So a good example of that is like I'm a busy small business owner. Anyone is going to recommend that I get like an assistant of some sort, right? Now, whether or not that actually is helpful to me all depends on whether or not I can actually develop a system to manage and support that assistant in actually assisting me. If they bring in an assistant and just like blom it on, it actually is going to hold me back. I was talking to somebody yesterday that was assigned kind of like a second IA because they had so much IA and they found it to be actually distracting. They were like, I had this person that was constantly following me around and I have to get this brass tacks thing done. So I worry with AI that we are doing the same thing. We're sort of like throwing things at it and hoping that it's going to figure it out based on its current context. When really what we need to be doing is creating systems that involve humans and the machines to really understand what the task at hand is so that we can figure out what the right intervention points are for these technologies versus the right places where humans really are the right, gate to get through. So I think that like I see too many people managing their AIs, at least the LLMs, as yeah, assistants that they never trained and are we're lucky that they don't get frustrated with us, is all I have to say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just to add to that, there's like certain design heuristics that change with LLMs, and it's strategic. And one of those things, and I'm going to pull this in from the semantic web world, is our design heuristics when we design ontologies, for example, or knowledge graphs, is we start with competency questions, which is like what questions do I want this thing to answer? And you design for that specific constraint, which pulls that thread all the way through. So you're designing for purpose. If you design with LLMs with no purpose, no intent, then you're going to end up with those results, no purpose, no intent. So there's that other part of the human's role in that, and it goes beyond guardrails and evaluations and all those things, because of course that's all included. But the idea is to design with intent and purpose, like anything else. But that requires thoughtfulness, intentionality, and and I think we can lose sight of that, especially if you're working in big tech right now. There's so much pressure to produce results and to use AI. It can tend to distract from those heuristics.
Yeah, Jessica, that reminds me of something. I want to make sure we get to it in this conversation. This idea that like everybody is having AI thrust upon them, whether they want it or
Yeah.
not, at this point in their careers, and and yet we see every day. I read 3 articles before breakfast this morning about the lack of real uptake of AI and real results, especially from the generative AI side of things. Um, we're not going to resolve the big question of that in this conversation, but I'm curious from each of you your perspective of how to cope with that dynamic, like how to, like not push back, but how to meet the real need that bosses and other people are presenting as like, hey, we got to be using AI. We spent all this money on it, versus like what you can actually do with it. Do you have pragmatic ways of sorting out like where your time is best spent?
Yeah, I mean, I personally do. I
Yeah.
do work with companies, so I'm working with a large banking institution right now, and actually also working with an architectural firm. Two very different industries and different needs, and so again, strategy. But one thing that's emerging is, I think Abby or someone, Mike put in token maxing. The spend is really starting to hurt businesses, and it's causing a lot of businesses. We're right at this precipice of things sort of, of the spend of the cost of AI really starting to squeeze businesses in a way that it favors humans and it favors strategy. And so something I've done a lot of research and writing about, related to token maxing and the cost is, the difference. There's system one and system two. One's fast, one's reactive. It's sort of like the first thing that comes to mind, the thing that you blurt out and say, versus the slower, more thoughtful, logical approach. And so it's presenting strategy and heuristics and design with timelines that are realistic. And I know that it's hard because the pressure from the business is just so, but in order to meet certain expectations, being realistic to the business. Now, something that I do, and I don't know if anyone feels comfortable with this, but I've sort of called it the Taylor Swift of industry. response is that something happens usually on a contract, on a job, or in conversation where a topic's brought up that becomes inspiration for a piece that I write. That piece I'll share with the business. It's really important to synthesize as well. LLMs are synthesizing to a certain extent, or that's our expectation. Humans need to do the same. So the more that you can present the business with a compelling position, heuristics, I'm going to say that again, strategy, those sorts of things, it's really sort of putting together a portfolio, more or less, of what the project is end to end in a digestible manner.
Nice.
I feel like I'm
Yeah.
having a like a flashback kind of moment again. And I don't know, maybe I'm just like in a historical mood. I feel like we could be talking about like bringing human-centered thinking into software.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the token maxing is the overstressed engineering team with the project manager that's drawing interfaces like at nights and weekends to try to get them unlocked of like 15 years ago. And it's so interesting because like back then, information architecture had a bit of a code name, which was the pain with no name, because businesses often felt this thing for a really long time before they actually knew what it was or who could help. And it feels so similar. It's like the pain with no name right now is the token burn. Like it's the fact that these LLMs are just spinning the same way that our engineers were spinning before we put people into the position of representing what the human side of software should even be. So yeah, it occurs to me, Jessica, as you're walking through it, I'm like, man, I think that this whole audience, many of which were here in 2015, I think we could go back in time, and if we remove the word AI from the transcript and we replace it, I think that we'd be still talking about the same thing. It's like you're talking about strategy versus tactic. You're talking about long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. Back then, we were all terrified because Facebook had the move fast, break things, you know? Now I think they only sew that on the inside of hoodies or something. Like it really is like a pattern that it almost feels like it's a pendulum that swings back and forth in the industry between us understanding and admitting that long-term thinking matters and just being like, nah, you know what? Screw it. It can't. It just can't. We don't say it doesn't. We just say it can't right now. So yeah,
Uh,
maybe that's my salty response.
Jorge, I was just going to call you out.
yeah, I'm going to give you. I think I'm going to give you a reason for optimism here. I don't hear the word token maxing coming up much anymore. I would say that in the first half of this year, one of the big developments is that we have started to see an end to magical thinking around this technology as organizations are grappling with the realities of what it entails. Um, it's also become clear that development of the frontier models is it's not that it's slowing down, but there are constraints, right? Like there are natural constraints to what people are going to accept. There are natural constraints as to what governments are going to accept. That's becoming increasingly clear. There are costs to the technology. And I would say that the most important technology question facing organizations in the middle of 2026 is how they're going to structure information so they can get strategic value from large language models. Guess who is well positioned to help them with that problem, right? Uh, I think that the idea that we're just going to throw crap at these things and they're going to solve it for us, organizations already understand that that's not the way forward. The question now is, who can help make sense of this? And that's why I've kept saying, like, we need to return to the original idea behind information architecture, which is how do we structure information to make it useful, understandable, usable? Yes, Javi, by people, but hey, also by these uh, non-deterministic systems that we're working with now, right? Like these languaging systems that are consuming structured information and hopefully doing useful things with it. But it needs to be done strategically. So I see that as great cause for optimism in this community. Uh, I hope I'm not alone in that.
I'm also optimistic
No,
about that, Jorge. But I have a question because I really I've been thinking a lot about this because like the concept information I feel like has just been like a lifelong annoyance for me. I'm like the concept of information from what I've taken away is that it's not the same as content, right? And that content lives out here and information lives in here. So when it comes to AIs, I think that you're correct. We need to be architecting information to make sense to AIs. But the way we've been taught to architect information is to understand how the information might be processed from content into information in their head. What does an AI do in terms of that translation? Like, I don't think that they have information. They get content and then they have data and they give us back content. But like, what is the information part and can we even access it? And then to Jessica's early point, like, how is that all being built has everything to do with like the intentions of large corporations that are absolutely not incentivized to support us. So, yeah, I'm optimistic and then I'm also pessimistic again. So, yeah, that's the swing I'm on right now.
And
Jessica.
yeah, I'm like chomping at the bit here. So yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I think is fascinating, and again, I write about this quite a bit, is the neurosymbolic approach. So when we look at data, information, knowledge, whether it's continuum or not, or whatever your personal beliefs are, the point is that it's, AI as we know it, large language models are probabilistic. It's just guessing the next word in a sentence. They're also known plagiarizers. And so that's a big problem. And and they are creating content at an alarming rate. So to that point, is this information, is this knowledge, is this just remix? There's a lot of discussion around that. So ultimately, what that does is it has a huge impact on our information environments and our knowledge ecosystems, and that's a huge risk. So the thing that has been acknowledged is symbolic AI, which includes ontologies, logical reasoning, that has proven to counterbalance. That's sort of the logical thinking and logical reasoning is the counterbalance to the probabilistic system. So right now we're dealing with generative AI, which is probabilistic, and then you counterbalance it with symbolic, it equals together neurosymbolic AI. It is like system one plus system two. So the reality is that to a certain extent, that requires a lot of us to upskill. And I know that's been like overused. I see it as an opportunity and a personal evolution, but at the same time, we enter this world where misinformation and disinformation, which also is in our best interest to kind of fight against, is at, risen to an alarming rate. So there's also the social responsibility piece that comes into this picture. And I don't want to get political, but it's really important. There's a certain stewardship that comes with it. So that comes from being careful, thoughtful, and scientific about what we're building and how we're building it.
One thing I want to get in, I think all three of you are among the top in the world at this, the skills of modeling this stuff, because it feels like when we're dealing with abstraction and with, I don't know, especially with new probabilistic systems and new hybrid systems like neurosymbolic architectures, it feels like there's a need to up our modeling game. And I'm wondering, we all have good, like I don't know what percentage of IA practice that is, but there's, I think, whether you're dealing with LLM kind of workflows or with neurosymbolic architectures or contributing to some kind of knowledge representation system, it feels like a time where there's a need to upgrade our modeling skills. And Jorge, I'd love to ask you about that first, because you did this brilliant post a couple of years ago about the differences between mental modeling, conceptual modeling, and implementation models. So I'm thinking of you as the modeling guy to start with, if that's okay.
Yes, and this is obviously related to what Jessica's talking about. These models get instantiated as structures that then language models can use to help make sense of things. But the post that you're alluding to, Larry, argues that there are different. We engage with different models, right, that have different roles. And I think that those of us in this call probably understand that, but the people in the business world in general are not used to thinking about information systems at that level of abstraction. It is a particular skill, a particular set of muscles that one develops, right? And again, I believe there's an urgent need for people in the organizations building the systems that we're interacting with to bring that particular skill set to projects. right? The ability to look at a subject domain and think about it as a whole that is composed of parts that interrelate in ways that allow the system to accomplish certain things. That's a very particular skill, and I think that a lot of people in this call probably take it for granted. It is
Hmm.
not common, right? And I think of the kind of work that we do as a sort of Venn diagram where we have systems in one circle. So systems thinking, this ability to look at the whole and look at the pieces and think about how the two relate. Design, and I think that design is different from engineering. So design, and then the third area is language, right? The ability to draw distinctions between things, name them, and then through those distinctions drive relationships between concepts and distinctions between concepts that allow the system to achieve certain goals. I feel like I'm talking a little bit abstractly, but I just wanted to
Hmm.
emphasize the fact that this ability to look at a subject domain at that level of abstraction where you're modeling it as a set of concepts is not an ability that everyone has, and it's not an ability that is widespread in the business world. So again, we have a lot to contribute here, folks.
No, but and I love the way you're saying that, Jorge, that like part of our core competency is that ability. And so that gives us tools like your Venn diagram to help people understand what's going on as we help them solve these messes. But hey, I want to give Abby and Jessica, either both of you, a chance to chime in on that as well.
I have so many
Mm.
thoughts. I think that we're still bad at modeling. Like I just don't think that we're good at it yet. Like even we have the best on this call, and I don't think that we're all that good at it. Not because we haven't modeled through everything we've had to model through so far, but because we haven't gotten good enough at it to teach people who don't know how to do it. So I think that we're still like kind of unicorn farming, where we're trying to find the special people that have taken it upon themselves to learn this skill. And Jorge is right. A lot of us take it for granted. It is a very hard skill to teach because we do not have the patterns that we can rely on. The patterns that we do have worked for us for a time, and they're all now being challenged. So it's like having the right amount of people to teach the right amount of people so that we don't overburden this amount of it feels like a system design challenge to figure out how do we teach people how to model, because to Jorge's point, we're going to need an army of folks, not just the people on this call.
Well, I will
I'll,
tell you, my book is teaching exactly the modeling. My upcoming book, which is
So excited.
there's the pre-order link I put in here, and it absolutely teaches that from, and I know it's the concept of the ontology pipeline, which was named just serendipitously by at a conference. It was sort of a crowdsourced name for it, but the idea of moving from controlled vocabulary to taxonomy, metadata schemas,
Right.
Sori, ontologies to knowledge graphs, and understanding knowledge graphs are an architecture rather than that's, I think, the most interesting thing from that conceptualization is that no two knowledge graphs are the same. They're very nuanced in architectures. And
Right.
if you think of what we're doing here as information architects, that is critical for designing, for example, a knowledge graph. It's a new surface.
Yeah.
And it's a new asset and it's an opportunity. I keep on going back to this being an opportunity, but it's like, how do we evolve our skills and our own selves, humanists, and bring that into that fold? It's absolutely learning.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Larry, I know you took the Knowledge Graph Academy, and again, we've had tons of content strategists and we've had tons of information architects join the European and US cohorts, but it's like that sort of modeling skill and bringing, and I call it full stack IA, but it's, I've been in plenty of organizations where IAs are hired and they do their own magic for front end design, and it's beautiful, but it's not technically feasible
Yep.
because the modeling discipline's not there from a technical standpoint, a systems engineering perspective. So again, it goes back to how do you sort of imbue yourself with these skills, and it's a combination of learning and practice. Getting your hands dirty. Like I'm very much like mess up as much as you want and as much as you can until, feeling safe with the experimentation process. I think that's what I see emerging.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Thanks both for that, the substance of your question, your answer, but also I kind of have been looking for a way to transition into audience participation. But also I want to quickly say that Cruz Saunders and I and some of the other folks on the Kinetic Council team are working on like a semantics specific set of events or roundtables or something. So we'll have a chance to go a lot more into what you're talking about. And I hope we can talk you into participating in some of that. But hey, I want to make sure before, because we're getting close to time. I love how this conversation is going, but I want to give Sarah, I don't know, have you been following the chat? I haven't been able to follow super closely, but do you have a feel for how questions might be queued up or?
Yes,
Um,
lots of great, love all the sharing in the chat. I did flag Dan Brown earlier in the conversation, put in the chat. I'm seeing the role UX strategist more and more. How would you characterize the difference between information architecture and UX strategy?
oh, interesting. Anybody have thoughts on that?
I wouldn't. That's what I would say. I think that like along with the point that I made about we're not very good at modeling, we're not very good at labeling either, especially ourselves. So we're still arguing about what this thing is called. We're still arguing about what the documents are called. We're still arguing about what our boss's title is. Like all of this stuff is uh, I mean, I think it's important because we have to fit into the structures that we have to exist within, but it's also at a certain point counterproductive. So, yeah, as a person who fought for information architecture as a term to remain a term for a very long time, my commitment to it ends at that. It is a concept to me, not a job title. So, yeah, like the idea of somebody being like, I'm a strategist, like that person uses information architecture all day long, unless they are not good at their job, in which case they probably don't use information architecture all day long. Do they know the term information architecture? Crapshoot. Total crapshoot. What was their education? Who have they met along the way? Who do they read? Who do they go to conferences with? Like all of that would determine whether or not they even know that term. But I guarantee you that at the core, if they are good at that role, they are using the tools, whether or not they call them what we call them. So.
Mhm.
I
Jorge,
will
I saw
say,
you leaning. Yep.
yeah, fixating on labels is one of the occupational hazards of this discipline. I would say that the IA thing to do is to use labels that are meaningful to the people that you're hoping to communicate with. If the label information architect does not serve your needs, then by all means do not use it. The main point is to add value, right? And I want to circle back to a prompt from Dan in the chat there, talking about skills versus a mindset shift. I think that that's the main mindset shift that I would like to promote, which is shifting from thinking that we are, Abby used the phrases like, how do we fit into the existing structures? It's like, I don't know that I care so much anymore about fitting into existing structures. The existing structures are all up in the air right now. I think that we have an opportunity to um, reframe how we can bring value. It's almost like this is a unique, like I've seen it twice in my career. The first time was the web 30 something years ago, right? Where it's like, wow, this new medium is going to upend everything. And it was very clear to anyone who was paying attention that it was going to change the world. And this is another moment like that. It's so rare to have one of these in your career, and to have two is amazing, right? So we are now at this inflection point where we have the ability to help structure the way forward. And I would encourage everyone, like Dan, to your point, like if is a mind shift, a shift in mental models that is needed, I would encourage everyone to think in terms of not how can I. There's a cliche from the architecture world. It's like architects are it's like we're not here to like fill in like a laundry list of things that we're going to do. We're here to like help solve problems, and we're going to help solve some pretty big problems, and we're going to speak to people in terms that they can understand, that they find meaningful, and that's how we're going to succeed.
Thanks, Jorge. Jessica, were you going to say something? I thought.
I've served with the formal title of information architect twice. I didn't choose that title. And what's interesting is, was it any different from my role as a senior taxonomist and ontologist? Not really. Was it any different from my enterprise semantic architect role? Not really. Was it much different from my librarian job? not much. And so what's interesting is I agree, don't get attached to the label and sort of embodying something that will evolve and could evolve and where skills are, the weight of skills changes with the technologies as they change. It's important not to get stuck to Abby's like entire book lineage. It's really, really important not to get stuck and to continue to evolve your skills and your practice. I mean, that's the creative element and the human element as well. Um, and so, the expectations that a role can hold, every organization, because of its culture, is going to think of information architecture differently. And they're good that label sort of it really within an organization. So at Amazon, I was an information architect. At Adobe, I was an information architect. It was a label, maybe poorly or inappropriately assigned, who knows? But it really just aligns more with how an organization just has a division of responsibility. And that's what it
Yeah.
really.
I don't know how we're all going to cultivate equanimity around that, but I think it feels like it's just the way it is. So,
It's the way it is.
the tragic disconnect and the cruel irony that a bunch of word nerds and semantics nerds can't agree on languages.
Yeah.
Well, that's yeah. Abby,
But
yeah.
wouldn't it be cool if, because of the AI revolution, we actually got to label everything? Like, because we've been kept from labeling everything semantically for years. In many organizations, they're still labeling things really crazily. And so, yeah, I think it would be really interesting if this AI revolution is sort of like our Trojan horse to bring IA actually into the organization. We just had to reverse the acronym. Like, what? It was there the whole time, you guys. So, yeah, I think that it is a very potentially hopeful thing. And like the mindset that I would like to see shift in terms of information architects practicing today is to not be scared. Like, I hear from a lot of information architects that are scared, not necessarily people with that title, but people with that mindset and with that background. And they are scared of what this means. And I think to those people, I keep saying, like, we get to decide what that means. Right. And when I was at the IA conference this last spring, the hopeful side of that event really was pointing out that we have the skills to help these folks. We just have to present ourselves in the right opportunities to do so. And yeah, I think like keeping keeping a trust in yourself and in your training and in your background that all will apply in this new world, that it's not like wiping everything away and starting fresh, that it actually is all applicable. You're going to be able to tell those stories. And one day you too might have a gray beard like Mike Atherton. Yeah.
Thanks, Abby. Hey, I want to observe we're coming up almost the time, and I want to give Sarah a little bit at the end, time of at the end to close. But I want to give each of you a chance before we wrap up. Is there anything you want to revisit from the conversation, or just want to make sure you share about this topic before we wrap up? And while you think, I'll tell the folks on the call that like this isn't the end of this conversation. Everybody here is eminently connectable with on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to convene another conversation. So if we didn't get to your question, apologies, and we'll do our best to do that later. But back to the panelists.
I mean, I could talk to these folks all day, but that's not feasible. So
We could do that. You invented World IA Day. We could just have World IA Talk Day and just convene someplace and yeah.
Larry, a lot of people are asking me about job opportunities and what does the market look like for people with our skill set. Panel.
I see a lot of this. I think there are opportunities. But what I'm seeing I did a big job analysis across these roles. And, earlier, Larry, you said UX strategist, content strategist. Again, those roles, I think that it's more looking at the grouping of job titles, not one job title in particular. But I'm seeing an increase in some of these roles. Things that are decreasing are design only. That's what I'm seeing decrease. Like if you don't have a tool belt with multiple tools in in your toolbox or whatever, you're not the opportunities shrink. So it's becoming more dynamic and interdisciplinary, which I think is I think that goes with any job right now. software developers, that role is changing immensely. And so to expect that there's stagnation, I think it's really familiarizing ourselves with how these new job roles and descriptions are emerging.
I would say this,
Jorge,
people who
yeah.
think that their job is to draw rectangles that represent screens are going to be in trouble. So if you think of your job as how do you organize systems that add value, you have a better chance. I'll say that. And I realize we're running up on time, so I'm not going to elaborate.
That's
Abby,
yeah, great closing thought, Jorge, and I'm glad you brought that up, Jessica. We a project that's been running behind the scenes. We've talked about it at a few events, is the Knowledge Graph project that a bunch of volunteers are working on, and that's going to be really illuminating for how interdisciplinary things have become, and that's going to be come a great resource that we're going to be hosting pretty soon. Larry, any final comments before I wrap up?
no, I just want to thank the panelists for their awesome contributions and for everyone for showing up. And apologize for not, like, I really would love to set aside a whole day to just talk about this stuff. So let's all meet in, I don't know, maybe in Philly at at some IA conference or something sometime and continue this. But for now, thanks to everyone.
Yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Larry, one of the things I appreciate, I want to go back to the very beginning of the panel, is that your first question asked about mindset. I go to a lot of conferences, I go to a lot of webinars, and tech tools, the one is at the forefront of most conversations. And I think what a great grounding thing to keep in mind, no pun intended, that approaching this era with the right mindset and kind of being explicit and articulate about what we need, so important. And a takeaway that I have is that information architecture is always present in our environments, whether we see it or name it or not, whether it's good information architecture or not. So what a great topic for even folks who aren't working directly in the discipline to sort of to be aware of. And I wrote down a couple words to capture my takeaways that I heard kind of as themes throughout, which is I flagged the word discernment. I think that's so important for this time. Intent, an evergreen word, right? Counterbalance as the pendulum is swinging. Two more words. Systems, have to keep that in mind. And for fun, I had to write down the word salty because that was mentioned a couple times. And my commentary on that is we need a little salt, right? I live in the desert. I got to take my electrolytes every day, but you don't want too much. So how can we be salty in a productive way? And I think this was such a great example of that. I am going to drop our links in the chat one more time. Can't
While
wait
you do
to
that,
see
I'll
you.
point out that in the semantic world, there's this notion of just enough semantics. And I'm going to say
Okay.
just enough saltiness in IA discussions. That's a good concept.
Yes, I love it. Really hope to see you on the next one. Please do register for that September 17th event. It's going to be a fun party and a really important topic. Josh and I have already started brainstorming. It's going to be really interesting to look at the intersection of marketing and kinetic information, and really hope to see you there and online and in the Slack workspace. And thanks everyone for being here. Have a great day, and we'll catch you at the next one. Thanks again to our panelists.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.